It's ridiculous to me that Gale isn't offered the same leniency as every other character in the series. The fact that I see people hating on Gale while defending Caesar Flickerman is so confusing to me. Because at the crux of the story, Gale is a victim. He is not the enemy, he is not a villain, he is a traumatized child. Over the course of the series, Gale becomes a character foil for Katniss, showing just how similar they were in the first book. Katniss makes it very clear in the first book that her and Gale think a lot alike. Now, Katniss's perspective shifts when she goes into the Hunger Games and experiences things that Gale hasn't. I'm constantly seeing the argument that Gale is angry for no reason, which is so untrue. Because if you don't understand why Gale is as angry as he is, then I don't think that you properly understand the series. Gale has been set up to fail from the very beginning of his life. He loses his father as a teenager and then becomes the main provider for his family. At the age of 18, his name is in the Reaping Bowl 42 times because of how much he's had to take out Tesserae. Because even though he hunts every single day with Katniss, it is not enough to feed his family. When Gale gets whipped in Catching Fire, it is because he is trying to feed his family. I've seen people say that Gale acts like he was in the Hunger Games and that he suffered just as much as Katniss and Peeta, which isn't exactly what he does. He never states that he has it worse. All he wants is for Katniss to take a look and see what she could do for the rebellion, which is admittedly unfair of him. But for someone like Gale, who has been oppressed his entire life, the idea of a rebellion must seem amazing. There's also the argument that Gale is extremely possessive of Katniss, and I agree that that's a problem. But what people fail to remember is that Katniss admits that she would be the exact same way if Gale had been the one who had volunteered for Rory. Katniss actually imagines this and then thinks, the hatred I feel for him, for the Phantom Girl, for everything is so real and immediate that it chokes me. Gale is mine, I am his. Then he watches his best friend go back into the games and then his home is bombed. During that bombing, Gale saved 800 people. As a 19-year-old with bombs raining down, he thought on his feet and saved lives. He led people out of District 12 to safety. And then people say that he purposefully didn't save Peeta's family. Gale lived in the Seam. Peeta's family lived in town. Obviously, he was going to save the people from the Seam first. They were closest. Gale went out of his way to get Prim and Katniss's mother, because that is his best friend's family. This is a 19-year-old boy who is undergoing intense stress and dealing with a traumatic event, and people expect him to remember Peeta's family. Then Gale and a few able-bodied people hunted for all of those who had survived the bombing. For 3 days. Finally, he joins the rebellion, and he is an anger and bitter young man. Which is totally understandable considering everything he has gone through. It's not a good thing, but it is understandable. And then Coin offers Gale some sense of power, and Gale, who has never even considered having any power ever in his life, immediately takes it. He has been oppressed by the system for years, and then he is exploited by Coin, who he thinks he can trust. Gale doesn't feel empathy for the people of the capital because he hasn't interacted with them, and his entire life, none of them have felt empathy for him. Yes, his anger is misplaced, but it is understandable. He is a symbol of war and what war can do to children. In Catching Fire, there's a point where Gale refuses to leave 12 because he's worried about his community and what will happen to the people there. Yet, in Mockingjay, he is willing to kill innocent people. He has been radicalized. And then Gale is blamed for Prim's death and the bombs being dropped. But yet, Beetee was the one who designed them, Coin was the one who released them, and Plutarch knew about them the whole time. Gale was 19 and barely an adult. People act like Gale wanted Prim to die when Gale saved her life many times. Gale made sure that Prim and Katniss's mother were fed while she was in the games. He saves her during the bombing of District 13, and yet people are convinced he wanted her dead? And this isn't to say that Gale is a good person or a good friend, because he is not. I am not a fan of Gale, but Gale was a traumatized child, and people are blaming the child instead of blaming the adults who are doing the traumatizing. Because the worst thing about Gale is his inability to learn where his anger should be directed. It is not fair to compare Gale and Peeta because Peeta has had a much more privileged life than Gale. Gale was radicalized by the very same people that were oppressing him. He is the most complex and most interesting character in the entire series. Let me know what you guys want to hear about next.